So my name's Kim Rowe, and it's my pleasure today to get to introduce Carlos Martinez Rivera. He's going to be speaking with us about the Fire Nation. And when I first read Carlos's bio, I have to say that I felt like I needed another life because I wanted to start over and have such a great career that he has had, and he's so young. It's a really fascinating career that he's had. He's originally from Puerto Rico. He completed his BS in biology and with a minor in botany at the University of Puerto Rico, Mayagüez. He earned his Ph.D. at the University of Missouri, Columbia, studying sexual selection and evolution of frog calls in noisy, competitive environments. And he's not talking about landscapers with leaf blowers. He's talking about frog choruses. And in that realm, he worked with conservation projects in the coastal cloud forests of Ecuador. Don't we all want to do that? Rivera then joined the Philadelphia Zoo, and there he was the curator of amphibians and reptiles and an amphibian conservation biologist. His focus was to develop and implement conservation projects for critically endangered amphibians in the tropical Andes. He also worked in the Caribbean and locally. Joining the Pinelands Preservation Alliance in 2021 as the Director of Conservation Science, he used science data with policymaking and outreach programs to affect conservation actions at the state, regional, and local levels in New Jersey, helping to save the Pine Barrens. And currently, Carlos has a new project, which is really exciting. He's the Curator of Living Collections at the Vinci Science Center in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And there he is planning a new Lehigh River watershed exhibit and education programs that support that exhibit. And it's scheduled to open in April 2024. So I'm eager to get out there to see it. Their goal is to showcase the biodiversity of plants and animals in the Lehigh region and the need to protect this amazing ecosystem. So welcome, Carlos.
Thank you. Yeah, well, thank you all for this opportunity. And one of the coolest things I did in my short stint at Pinelands Preservation Alliance was burn 17 acres of mainly grasslands, which is how I ended up in here. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And the funny thing about leaf blowers and frogs is that, yes, that part of my dissertation was working with amphibian choruses. But interestingly, loud sounds like leaf blowers also affect how and when they calls. They can make their calls. And interestingly also, in the terms of more rural environments, for example, in Philly, the airports coming in and out of the airplanes coming in and out of the airport, and also just the noise on the highway affects the breeding ability of the Atlantic coast leopard frog in that particular area, which was one of the frogs mentioned in the morning in our wetland talk. So yeah, it's all connected, but we're going to talk about the Fire Nation, but not this kind of Fire Nation, and not this kind of Fire Nation either. Nothing with Navi or fire benders. We're going to talk about this kind of Fire Nation, which is where we're basically sitting right now in the pines of New Jersey, and talk about life and death through fire in the Pine Barrens. This scene, again, is from the fire that just occurred last year in June in the Molucca River, and it is basically an inferno. Of course, it looks very, very devastating, and it definitely was immediately in the aftermath, because what we think about the Pine Barrens is basically this. We think of this vast ocean of trees where you can just, again, see just wildlife and beauty in the Pine Barrens, and what we saw earlier is sort of the opposite of that. But Pine Barrens or the Pinelands are basically these areas that, as you may figure out already, are dominated by pine trees, and therefore pine tree ecology. As we've mentioned before, they're dominated also by porous and sandy soils, which are also acidic mainly because of the decomposition of the pine needles And in general, most pine forests and pinelands are marked by a dry and wet season. They are prone to fires, of course. We'll keep hearing that over and over. And pine trees in general are basically nature's tinder. They also burn up really quick for a reason which we'll talk in a little bit. And because of this ecology and this reality of fires and soil and everything, it has a unique wildlife of both plants and animals and other organisms that are uniquely adapted to this kind of ecology. But it's not only found in New Jersey as well. If you've been running around the Pinelands, you have not seen a site like this because this is not in New Jersey. The Pine Barrens itself, again, it's the name comes from the fact that it's basically a barren land that only has pines and not much else, but it's a very utilitarian word. It served no human purpose or no economical purpose for the most part. Of course, in the Pine Barrens, there was a whole industry of extracting iron, of making glass, and of making other products from whatever was available, but it wasn't as vast as in other areas, again, because it's considered barren land for agriculture. Again, mainly because the soils are very acidic, very dry in most areas and well-drained, so they're considered nutrient poor and don't have enough organic material like we saw earlier with Becky as well. Throughout the region, they usually occur in large areas with sandy glacial deposits and outwash plains, lake beds, and other areas along rivers. So again, it's this lack of nutrient and a lot of sand in the area that make it unique in a way. And again, most of the plant communities are considered xeric or adapted to this dry environment and dominated by pines, but include also some other hardwood trees that can come in areas of less fire and more rain, and also when it's more humid. And also a bunch of grasses, forbs, and low shrubs, Ericaceae family. We've heard with Sam, Ericacea's community. We'll talk about that a little bit. It also has a lot of wetlands and bogs and of course, vernal pools and rivers, and as you might guess, they are fire prone. The Pinelands or Pine Barrens, why do we hear the different names? There's usually or generally no difference in that. So our Pine Barrens, it's a type of pinelands, but not all type of pinelands are called Pine Barrens, but it's basically just language in any way. One thing that's important, though, is that not only we are here in South Jersey is considered actual Pine Barrens habitat. Basically, a lot of coastal areas in the Atlantic coastal plains that used to be pines are not anymore. Just cities and just industrial and developed areas. So that's why we refer to this area as the Pinelands, because it's what's left, basically. And most of this habitat loss, again, is being unregulated resource extraction, agriculture, and just regular urban sprawl. And again, the other problem that we're facing right now, again, is the intrusion of oaks and other trees in the area that are eliminating the native habitat or the native communities that we used to have, again, caused by development, urbanization, fire suppression, and also other practices like logging, tilling, and agriculture. But most pine scenery, again, not in New Jersey, can tend to look like this, and also like this. These two images are from Haiti. They're from Massif de la Selle in the south part of the island, and the case of Haiti, and then Sierra de Bauruco in the Dominican Republic. And they always show this type of habitat, especially when talking about the pinelands, because it is a little bit different. There's definitely a lot of, if you go back one slide, a lot of hills. This mountain range begins at 2,000 meters above sea level, but also most of it looks like this. So it may look pretty with all the greens and the colors of the evening, but it's basically mountains devoid of vegetation. So it's completely destroyed, and that's what we were trying to work in there, trying to save whatever biodiversity was left in those forests. But back up here to the north, and also in general, a lot of the slides are just literally copy paste or screenshots from websites available, because there's no need to reinvent what's already out there. This again is from Rutgers and their station in the Pinelands. Soils, even though we had an awesome class earlier by Becky, the most important part in here is that they're mostly sandy soils, or what we call pot soils. And of course, I learned today that, also downer soils. And The species diversity, again, is very unique to the region and is relatively low compared to other parts and other kinds of forests. We'll talk a little bit about those ericaceous species and, of course, Atlantic white cedar. What I like about pot soils or podzol is that if you've played Minecraft, you can actually buy this type of soil again when you're creating your world down there, and you can actually recreate a pine forest with pot soils. So anyway, they're just soils that have, again, as we've discussed earlier, high mineral, high sandy soils with low nutrient for vegetation to grow. They're porous, so whatever water comes in just goes down to the underground aquifers, and again, don't provide much of a rich organic environment for much to grow. It also has low species diversity. If you go back to that image that you could see in Apple Pie Hill, looking at the fire tower down to the area, again, it looks very uniform, but it's actually a mosaic of environments, especially down below, as you start to look at the different areas that you can see within the different sections of the forest. And you do have a lot of oak trees and other trees that are found in the canopy as well. But again, when you go to the ericaceous vegetation, which is basically what we consider our blueberries, cranberries, azalea, mountain laurels, and others, if you're looking at these plants, it's because all of this is also from the Andes as well, not from the pinelands, but also trying to make comparisons of what I've studied similar to the pinelands in other areas. In the Andes mountain, even though you imagine it's mega diverse and everything different from the environment in here, this same family, Ericaceae, is also big and it's also very important for pollinators, for a lot of hummingbirds, and also a lot of bees in that particular area. And worldwide, again, blueberries are extremely important and are definitely the most known fruit that comes from a plant in this family, and along cranberries. And the same thing with azaleas and mountain laurels. If you've ever been down to the tropics, in the mountain regions, in Costa Rica, elsewhere, there's a lot of azalea in the mountains because they're beautiful plants that bloom. The same thing in Japan and other parts of the world, not just here in the pinelands. And again, it is a mega diverse family of plants that it's extremely important for wildlife all over the world. But back again now to the pinelands. The other dominant tree is the Atlantic white cedar and all the wetlands associated with it, with this particular tree. What's important about this tree is that it needs this flooded areas basically. So the water table has to come up and down depending on the season. They cannot be completely flooded all year round, or they end up dying. They cannot have so much salt intrusion, or they will die as well. And it's oftentimes the area that holds most of the microenvironments that make the Pine Barrens so diverse within its quote-unquote low diversity area. Includes areas where carnivorous plants can thrive, like pitcher plants, and particularly in the Pine Barrens is the area where most of the timber rattlesnakes use as their winter den. They go into the Atlantic white cedar bogs and forests to overwinter, which is not known to be as common in other parts in New Jersey and also other states. Now, when we talk about the fire issues or role of fire in the ecosystem, again, the fact that it's seasonally dry makes it prone to fire. And again, many of the plants in here have evolved to adapt to this particular kind of disturbance. If you continue in that second sentence, the history of fire predates European colonization, but along with logging in the past centuries and all of that have made the area looks what it does now. So basically it has been disturbed nonstop for the past 400 years is what this is trying to say. And again, there's a little bit of contradicting information in here that hints to the idea that wildfires are needed for the forest, but that we don't want them in the forest, right? So even when you talk about wildfires and the ecosystem, you're also talking about how we can sort of dominate and control it. And it makes sense because we don't want wildfires to also destroy homes and other areas. And we've also grown with the concept of a Smokey Bear telling us that fire is bad. And of course, it is bad. You know, Smokey Bear doesn't want people lighting up fires in public lands or even in their private homes. But fire suppression has also caused a lot of issues in terms of the ecology of the forest, and have also prevented some plants from naturally following the succession as they should in nature. And in images like this one, where you can see just a charred forest, this is again from last year from the Molokai River fire, about a week after the fire, everything is burned, everything looks dead, but you also see a lot of green. And all of that green is all the plants emerging right after the fire. And those very first plants that you see there are emerging in this particular image are those ericaceous shrubs. All the huckleberries and blueberries are coming up again. And it's basically because a lot of the vegetation here in the Pine Barrens gets what we call top killed. So the top, everything that's above ground, dies with the fire or looks dead or charred right after the fire, but it may or may not be completely dead. And within a couple of weeks, a lot of the actual roots and underground stems will begin emerging with new vegetation. And you also have other things in different plants like epicormic shoots, which you may or may not have heard, which are extremely common and important for pine forest, especially pitch pine, which you can see in the bottom image, and is all those green needles coming up of the bark of a tree that you would imagine should have been dead, but is not. And you also have serotinous cones, which depend on fire and a lot of hot temperature to actually open up and release those seeds. So there are some ecological benefits to a fire. And in general, it seems counterproductive, but it prevents organic matter from depositing over the years and making those rich, mature soils that, again, we learned about earlier today with Becky, and that thus it prevents a lot of generalist species and a lot of other trees to establish in that particular area. Those fires, when they sweep through, they also destroy a lot of invasive species. Fires in the Pine Barrens, depending on the area and how the fire was created, typically burn from 800 to 1,000 to 2,000 Fahrenheit or even higher than that. And again, depending on how intense the fire is, it's how many different plants is going to completely kill that are not native and not adapted to all this fire. When the fire burns up like it does, it opens up the canopy, and as you saw in the previous image, all of this green can emerge from the soil again, from the substrate, and recreate new environments which are actually good and expected for a lot of plants to grow in the area. And it promotes, again, like pitch pine, it allows them to grow and actually produce the seeds that we all love and like to see when you end up with a new fire. And I'm supposed to be able to pass this, and I'm not. So I may need help or not. Yeah, it's supposed.
The pitch pine thrives here.
Nope.
As it has developed
Yeah, I know. He lied to me. Jasper said I can just scroll, and that was it. Oh, two-finger scroll. Is that it? Yeah. Oh, there you go.
A little harder that way.
Yeah. And so this is just a short video. I think I can play the whole thing because I'm speeding through my slides.
to survive in these nutrient-poor soils. Its ability to dominate in such harsh conditions is further challenged by another defining element in Pine Barrens ecology: fire. The Pine Barrens is one of the most fire-prone places on Earth. Fire is a natural and necessary element of this landscape. It can rumble over and consume thousands of acres of forest. Many other trees succumb. Their bark and roots burn beyond recovery. The pitch pine uses fire to its advantage. Without fire, the pine forest would give way to other plants and trees. During a blaze, thick bark protects the wood of the pine. The tree may appear burned and dead, yet new buds will sprout from its charred trunk. The pitch pine's cones are often serotinous. Serotiny refers to their curious adaptation to fire. These cones are tightly sealed until exposed to extreme heat. When fire sweeps throughout the forest, the cones open and release seeds that are spread throughout by the fire's own windstorm. Dispersal ensures genetic diversity. It also ensures that the pines reclaim areas occupied by other species less resistant to fire, such as oak trees.
So why reinvent the wheel if we have this video already, right? And if I can, there you go. Okay, so basically that's what we see with all these fires in the pine barrens. And I see that Jasper is staying here for the next video because I'm going to try it again with this other one as well. This one here is just a teaser more than anything else, I guess. There you go. I need to click with one finger and then scroll with the other one. That's what I was not doing. And this is actually a 360 view within the fire. This was done in Franklin Parker Preserve a couple of years ago. You're gonna be inside a fire for a couple of minutes. Actually moving here. No. So I'm scrolling, moving around the camera and on top, and you can see how it ends up after the fire. So it's definitely devastating, and that actual part of the fire, again, we've all seen this, maybe not like this, but we've all seen the aftermath of this type of situation. So it is certainly stressful, and it's for the trees itself and for all the wildlife that you have in the forest. A lot of animals do die on these fires, from scorch, snakes and turtles, birds losing their nest, and the reproductive effort. Again, anything that had flowers and fruits, lost all that reproductive effort as well. But what comes after is going to be much stronger and much better because of the ecology of the pine barrens itself. And I thought I had it mastered. There you go. Yeah. So basically, what we just saw in thanks, Jasper. What we just saw in those videos is also represented in this fire succession slide, which is actually just a regular ecological succession slide. And this is what happens when you have any kind of disturbance. In this case, the disturbance is going to be fire. So you have the fire that destroys everything. And now you start again from zero. And you go throughout the years and time, what kind of habitat can come in next. In here, in this example, it suggests it may take 2 to 3 years, 3 or 4 years before grasses and other perennials can come in. But because of the actual ecology of the pine barrens, this happens in weeks, not even years or months. So just weeks after a fire, all the seed bank that's already there, and also all of those plants that have were top killed, so the green parts died, but not the roots and the stems. All of those plants begin the succession immediately. And the important part is that the entire ecology of the pine barrens, the entire evolution of the pine barrens is supposed to be in this window here of intermediate species, quote unquote. It's supposed to always have this mosaic or this mix and match of habitats of grasses and perennials, and then mixed forest, but mainly pine forest, because of this fire. And in theory, again, like I said, it's supposed to happen 3 to 4 years, 5 to 150 years, but fire is supposed to always hit any given part of the pine barrens in 50 or 60 years. And we're not supposed to ever be in this area of a climax community with mature oaks and things like that. But if you go to places like Batstow Village and also other towns within the Pinelands, because there hasn't been any fire over the past 150 or 200 years, because you want to keep those urban areas or historical areas intact, you end up with basically all mature community without pines or not too many pines on it. And again, like I mentioned earlier, this fire succession is nothing different than just secondary succession in any ecological setting. So again, and this fire succession, this is one of the instances where we were burning our property at Pinelands. And if I can do this one more time, thought I had it mastered. There you go. I just want to make you run, Jasper, that's all. So again, this is just the classic fire that you do when you do a prescribed burn. In this particular case was 17 acres. And this is not done by untrained pyromaniacs. This is done by the actual New Jersey Forest Fire Service. And you can call them, you can make an appointment, you can fill up a form online, and they will decide if your property is worthy of burning because, again, of the ecological integrity of the area, and they will decide which areas can be burned or not, ensuring that you don't end up destroying any property, whether yours, your neighbors, or roads, or electrical lines. And in our particular case, and this is in the physical property of Pinelands Preservation Alliance, there's 17 acres of native grasses that were planted with the intention of providing habitat for native birds and also pollinators and also some bees in particular, because eventually the farm around this property was going to be part of Pinelands Preservation Alliance, and it is right now. So currently the whole place is 70-some acres, 19 of which are grassland, and the other 50 are basically regenerative farming. And the intention is that this particular meadow will supply all the pollinators for the farm area. And in general, the whole habitat would be a nice experiment of showing how you can still use the land, how you can farm the land, while still providing some benefit for the nature around it. We don't want to see more pictures. Just close this one. And again, like the previous slide show, after the fire comes in, different vegetation comes in, beginning with grasses and sedges, and then several shrubs, and finally the bigger trees come again in the area. In the case of other parts of the pines, fire is not only good just for the pine trees, or not only good for other more normal vegetation, but also for carnivorous plants in general. I'm using pictures I got online of Venus flytrap, which are not native to New Jersey, but the same thing applies for our native carnivorous plants, both for Sarracenia and for all the sundews. It helps, again, remove all the vegetation that will eventually clog the habitat for the carnivorous plants so they can thrive in these boggy areas in the swamps. And it also provides the acidic soils for them that they actually need, along with the high sunlight areas that they need. In other habitats, again, in this, now we're going to go to the Mediterranean, where I haven't visited as a scientist, to look at what happens in other carnivorous plants that do depend on fire. So in the case of our carnivorous plants, fire benefits their development and how and where they grow. But in the case of some carnivorous plants, fire is the only way that they can survive. So in this case, this flytrap carnivorous plant is basically a giant sundew with all these long tentacles with the sticky substances for trapping insects. They only emerge after a fire because their seed are fire dependent. So they would come up right after a fire. They would form these patches of vegetation all over the area. And as in this particular case, it's not actually a forest, it's a heathland. But as this heathland matures, the other bushes and brushes basically suffocate the carnivorous plants and they wither away and die. When the next fire occurs, then those seeds come up again and germinate. So in this particular case, if you were to practice fire suppression, you eliminate the species completely because it's never going to germinate because you have no fire for them to germinate. If we go back across the pond again to the pine barrens, you also have animals that do benefit from fires. In this case, some of the are tiny, rather inconspicuous butterflies for the untrained eye. They do depend on fire because in nature, they depend on those areas where those grasses come in right after a fire. And it's only in those areas that they'll find their food source for the adults and also for the caterpillars. And in the same way that bees need to fly around looking for areas where they have the right kind of flower for them, these guys have to fly around looking for the right area of just burned patch of grasses where they can, again, produce a new cycle of butterfly on each year. So again, it's another example of fire ecology helping the natives in the area. And another thing that occurs in here with these fires, again, it prevents this organic matter from creating this rich, mature soils that keeps all of the invasives away that cannot thrive in the sandy soils and the highly acidic soils. But another factor that also benefits the pine barrens is the fact that we're sitting on a lot of glacial habitat that had all the sandy dunes that either used to be under a glacier or used to be just the ocean floor, and were never able to be colonized by vegetation because of the wind, but also because of the fire burning whatever was able to make it, and it never got to an area where you would have actual trees on it. And that again creates this, as I've been mentioning, the mosaic of habitat that makes the area so unique. This constant and dispersed and sometimes isolated fires within the region, again, ensuring that the pine barrens is not just pine, it's pine and other ecosystem and other environments. And likewise for the cedar swamp, they're not just wetlands with with Atlantic white cedars, they're wetlands with other vegetation, again, because the fires are controlling what happens and where it happens. In terms of humans and fire in the pine barrens, as I hinted earlier, we have been engaged in affecting the ecology of the area since humans arrived, not just modern times. And before Europeans came in, again, the natives, peoples all over North America, not just in the U.S. or Canada, but also in Mexico, in all the places where you have all these grasslands and all these pine-dominated forests, fire was always used as a tool to create the right habitat for agriculture and also for development of cities and villages and cultures. And it was also used to flush prey out of the environment like it has been done in other parts of the world as well. So humans have always mastered fire, of course, not just now the idea of preventing it. We've always used it to our advantage, but because of our new sedentary ways of building houses and building cities and building highways, now we don't want fire next to us. But we used to depend on fire for everything. And again, in the early days of settlements, again, fire was also used as a tool for colonization, but it also happens that a lot of careless fires would occur, and usually fires were just allowed to burn, and then that was it. Through the years and in more modern times, the USDA has created all these agencies and laws on how we can work to prevent forest fires, and how to mitigate forest fire, and how to manage forest fires. And I should have fully mastered this by now. And I guess I did. It's just not uploading yet. This is a nice presentation I found online, and I'm gonna scroll through a bunch of the slides. It is public, and I can share the link later for all of you guys. And I could have just given this presentation, but no. But what I do like about this is that it documents the Jakes Branch fire of 2002. So this was 20 years ago, and it was not a fun times for the people living in here in the area. So again, it happened 20 years ago. Basically, it was spotted at one of the fire towers. One of the things that's always important in forest fires, whether they're caused by humans, by lightning, or other cause, natural or human again, is ensure what was the general conditions in the area. So you can see hot but not scorching hot, low humidity, sort of high winds, and it was considered a moderate drought. So the conditions were not necessarily ideal for like a red flag for fire, but it was still the right time where fires are supposed to be occurring. Again, the smoke was first spotted by a fire tower. This is what those things are built for, so you can spot what's happening. And then immediately after it was reported, again, humidity drops because of the fire. And again, the fire also creates all this wind because of the difference in temperature. And then that wind, that speed of the wind now is going to really affect what happens in the area in general, and how it spreads or not. I'm going to go a little bit fast just to show the cool slides that I found looking for this. Again, it just shows how the crews began working to stop the fire in the area, and how they were working inside the fire to spread it, how they had to stop the Garden State Parkway as well. Again, working with helicopters, the classic hell scenes of the fire because of all the smoke, and blocking the sun's light and everything. Huge plumes of smoke in the area, actual buildings being destroyed because of the fire, and houses having to be evacuated. So again, destroyed buildings. And here's just examples of how patchy fire actually is, and why it's important for everybody to actually evacuate if you found that your neighborhood is under a fire warning or the risk of fire in itself. And again, just the entire process of working to extinguish the fire, and it was declared under control after a couple of days, actually. And again, the aftermath of the fire. And an interesting aspect is that it was actually some forensics were able to show where the fire began in Double Trouble State Park. So I guess you could argue it's triple trouble after this. And it was the classic fire pit left unattended after a campfire. So people went in, they set up a fire, whether they should have or not, but they didn't extinguish it properly, and then that was the cause. And this is usually the case in New Jersey, which is why it is important to see fire management as how to prevent it, because most of it are caused by human. And again, we in this case, humans, we like to say that we shouldn't engage with the ecosystem, with the environment, but sometimes our way of engaging with it ends up being this, right? Which may or may not be what we want want it to be. And people were actually charged with arson. I think three teenagers were actually charged with arson because of this. So again, this is basically what we are standing in terms of what we work when we have dealing with fire. How do you balance that economic ecosystem integrity with the economic reality of a fire? So is that a combination of issues that are causing problems in terms of how we manage this fire ecology? Because preventing fires would allow, again, the uncontrolled expansion of humans as well in the ecosystem, and also will cause all of this development that we may or may not want in an area like the pine barrens. And if you don't protect, allow fires to grow, then when you do have a fire, like also occurred 60 years ago, those fires can really destroy the area. The Black Saturday fire from 60 years ago in 1963 ended up consuming 183,000 acres of forest when it was done with all the fires that it created. And again, more recently, not just 20 years ago or 60 years ago, but last year, we had the Mollica River fire. And it was interesting because it happened along the Mollica River. So you had a lot of areas like this where one side was burned and one side was basically left intact. And it shows the classic sign, a couple of week or two after the fire of vegetation already emerging. This is a screen grab of the fire as it was happening in the area, and you can see some parts are already burned and others are burning now, and you can see the trails in between. This is another image of the fire as it was unfolding in the area. And like that fire 20 years ago at Double Trouble State Park, in this case, it is very possible that a campfire like this one was the actual cause of the fire. When we went to look at the area, Pinelands Preservation Alliance and other scientists, we have no way of determining that this particular campfire was the cause of it. But you have the telltale signs of a fire, a campfire in the middle, supposedly far away from the fire. But if you look at all those logs and embers next to it, who knows if they used those logs to try to extinguish, quote unquote, the fire, and then it spread and caused the actual fires. And at the end of it, it was estimated that it could have been a campfire, possibly that one or another, that ended up causing this particular fire. Again, New Jersey Forest Fire Service tries to manage what happens in the pinelands. There's usually around 1,500 fires that would consume over 7,000 acres all across New Jersey, not just in the Pine Barrens. But if we compare this with the Pine Barrens, even though 7,000 acres sounds like a lot, it is really not that much. And again, from a fire ecology perspective, from a human development perspective and agriculture, we don't want that to happen near humans. And again, here's where the NJ Forest Fire Service comes in to figure out how to balance one thing with the other, mainly with this prescribed burns, as I showed you that we did at our site, and using a professional and ecological approach with human safety first. So the fires occurred usually in late winter, early spring, the human caused prescribed burn, whereas natural fire are usually more in the summertime. And the idea is mainly to reduce forest fuel and also manage fire in the pinelands, and also control burns in selected areas, and combating wildfires and human-made fires with fire breaks, backfires, and other techniques. And they also carry out a lot of outreach and education, and they do have a blast. They are professional pyromaniacs because they do enjoy doing this. And this slide, I'm sorry, it was out of place. That's the area that we burn in Pinelands Preservation Alliance in Pemberton Road in Southampton. And as you can see, this image, this Google image is updated now, so it's 2023, and we did this a year ago. So from a sky view, according to Google Maps, you really can't see much of a difference in terms of a scorch area because, again, these are just grasses and meadows. But that day was certainly fun to burn it. We did it in part to eliminate a bunch of eggs from spotted lanternfly and also eliminate mile-a-minute and other invasives that we don't want in the area. Another thing that's important about fire suppression and how to combat fires, if we go back to this one image of the forest fire, again, you notice the main fire occurring in the center, but you also see those lines of fire occurring in the area. And you also notice that the wind is all blowing the smoke in one direction. And the fire, these are fire breaks made by them, by the fire department. And the intention is, since the wind is blowing, let's just, for the sake of this image, let's say it's blowing northeast, you put the fire break there, so the wind blows in that direction, and then this new smaller fire will eventually meet up the larger fire and consume all of the fuel for that larger fire. And by the time the small fire gets to the big fire, they will burn each other out. And also, the small fire, since it's done in favor of the wind, all of the embers and all of the hotness of the fire of the new fire created by the forest fire service is blowing everything towards the main fire, and that's the intention. That's why if you look at the news from back in the day, you never saw fire trucks, or that many fire trucks rather, or actual people with hoses inside the forest. Mainly because it occurred in areas that are far away from human settlements and houses and other buildings, but also because they tried to do it in a more natural way. And again, same here with more lines. So I like to show this image because even though it was bad, it was horrible, it was terrifying to see, and all of this smokes occurred, it's actually somewhat a natural fire. It was also low temperature compared to other fires in the pinelands. In the time that I have left, I want to talk about a proposition that made the news late last year in November, and it's the Allen and Oswego Road Fire Mitigation and Habitat Restoration Project. When it was announced years ago, it was supposed to be a good project, but when it came out again, news late last year, it received a lot of backfire, and we'll see why. So the good of this project is that it wants to reduce the risk and severity of wildfire. It wants to protect areas from invasive insects like the southern pine beetle. It would increase or promote forest health, and it would recreate historic habitat within the pine barrens, eliminating some trees that are not supposed to be there and opening up the canopy to areas the way it's supposed to be. How they're going to do it is what's seen as the ugly in this particular case, and this by itself is a 2-hour long discussion, and that could be turned ugly in the way depending on how much we talk about a particular part of it. They want to create and improve fire breaks. The fire breaks that we saw earlier, basically these lines where you can just prevent the fire from happening or set fire to one side next to the fire break and then just allow it to burn like that. They also want to thin the forest, and they want to thin the forest basically by doing 13 miles of road expansion, and this will be doing mainly by cutting down trees up to 1,300 acres of trees, and also using herbicides to eliminate invasive or to prevent invasives from growing once you've done this. And these last two statements is what really irated the public, because it sounds horrible to say that you're going to destroy this many trees and you're going to use those chemicals to do that. And when you do the math of 1,300 acres worth of trees, that added up to 2.4 million trees that could be destroyed if this happened. Again, this is kind of tiny, you may not see it, but just a screenshot of if you Google New Jersey pine, killed 2.4 million trees, is going to show up. And this was, again, in late November. And the headline was so eye-catchy and so like, oh my God, 2 million trees, that it made the news all over the U.S. and especially here in New Jersey. And again, the plan has been in the works for several years, and there's been ample times for the general public, universities, and conservation organizations to see the plan, to act on the plan, and to discuss the plan. When the news broke out in November, it was just because it was being voted on or presented rather in the Pinelands Commission. And that number, again, of up to 2 million trees, again, is by multiplying how many trees you have in the pinelands by 1,000 acres. But most of these trees are not going to be mature trees. And again, but it is still a large number. And another issue is, again, applying herbicides, which is like counterintuitive, of conservation, because we all know herbicides are not supposed to be good. And again, tree removal would imply less carbon sequestration. Canopy cover will be greatly reduced, 40%, 20%, even more in some areas. Some people propose that you may end up killing a lot of native wildlife, including pine snakes. All this suggests that there's no evidence or contradicting evidence on this type of techniques on fire and fire reduction. And the classic, if the Pinelands Commission is supposed to protect the forest, why are you going to destroy the forest? And, why do you need to expand 30 miles worth of road? Again, the counter arguments, or some of those counter arguments in here, is that most of the trees are saplings, less than 2 inches in diameter, 4, 5, 6 feet in height, and those are considered fire ladders that promote hotter and bigger fires. If you think about the video of the 360 fire, when that fire is sweeping through, most of what's burning are those smaller trees in there. And again, pesticides, that's a huge number of different agrochemicals, but in general, they are considered an accepted method, again, whatever that means, that can be employed to prevent invasives from colonizing newly disturbed areas, such as area has been cut down recently mechanically for removing smaller trees. The pine barrens is already sparse canopy. We're not the Amazon where you cannot see the sun from anywhere in the forest. So reducing the forest canopy sounds bad, but it's not as bad as it actually is in terms of interacting with the forest. And it also promotes the natural habitat. I think we discussed that, Sam discussed that with some of the bees in his previous talk. And again, in the grand scheme of things, and this is what really hurts people, 1,000 acres in 1,000,000 acres is like a millionaire spending $1,000 on a fancy, gold plate steak, right? So the number is big because it is still 1,000 acres, but 1,000 out of the huge vastness of the pine barrens may or may not be that much. Again, that's the argument. I am playing devil's advocate in here. So doing this is a sound investment when you consider the fire that burn out over the summer burn turn times as much as what would be destroyed in this particular case. So now we can discuss this. Like I said, I'm just playing devil's advocate, and that's it. Yep.
Good use of Elmo.
Yeah.
Let's look at a mic cue so that the folks that are on the, do we have mic runners someplace? We're firing up the mics. Just repeat the question.
Yep.
You gave a figure of, I can't remember, 1,400 acres a year or on average are burned, but how many of those are managed fires or controlled fires?
Yeah, the question is for the Forest Fire Service, how many of those acres are managed fires? Those are all unintentional fires. Those are the ones they have to extinguish.
Do you know how many managed?
No, I don't, unfortunately. But it's a good question, yes.
So I think you answered my question at the end, but I just wanted to clarify. So that prescribed fire that you showed that was in a grassland, I'm not used to expecting a prescribed burn in a grassland. I would expect it in a mature forest. So you're saying that was done to get rid of invasive species?
Yes. Yeah, and actually, if you wanna, so also, I mean, this is just on the outskirts of the Pinelands, a little bit west of the Pinelands. And grasslands are not a native landscape to this particular part, right? So we are creating a fake landscape with native species to benefit basically the native birds in the region and the native pollinators, recognizing that in 17 acres we cannot recreate a mini pinelands in that part of the property. So we're also recreating habitat that is not supposed to be necessarily native to the pinelands, but somewhat native to these parts of New Jersey.
Hey, how do these prescribed burns impact soil fertility after the fact?
If I would have stayed at Pinelands, I would answer that question. Because we did soil sampling before, mainly because, again, this particular area, again, this just shows the 17 acres of the grassland, but everything used to be soy farm, let's say 20 years ago, and it was a soy farm for a couple of generations. So the soils were considered to be extremely poor already, and we had that baseline data on the nutrients. Jeff Tober, the farmer at Rancocas Creek Farm, which is again the farm area, he does periodical testing of the fire. We also had a student before my time that they did their capstone project on the soil in the meadow area. By burning it, we in theory can possibly, depending on how we manage it, create more nutrients for vegetation to grow. Yes, but I left.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
one more thing. So in the area of doing the prescribed road burn alongside, you're going to be taking out a lot of sapling trees, but
Yep.
we also saw in the talk that the trees will regenerate much more quickly
Yes.
in this environment.
Yeah.
So theoretically, there would be more replacement happening. By
Yes, it depends on the species, and that's the classic answer a biologist should give you, right? For the native trees, yes, if we burn an area with pine trees, the pines are like, oh, thank you, man, and they just keep growing. But in here, we were trying to eliminate sweet gum, and also eliminate Tree of Heaven, of course. Tree of Heaven is basically destroyed, I don't know, with an atomic bomb because they're super resilient. But after you burn the area, it's much easier for the crew to come in and then just uproot or really chop it down. Or we do not use any pesticides in here because of the farm, but in another area, then it allows you to then, basically, poison the tree and kill it. So it's also a technique to better, for post fire removal of the actual invasive tree.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yep.
So obviously a restoration project like that has the potential to, halt future large fires, but do you know if they have to do any type of like environmental impact assessment on how that might affect the surrounding ecosystem when they start thinning out?
Yes. Yeah. You mean for the Allen and Oswego Road project?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All of that is included as well. They have been, getting baseline data already. They went in with the Mollica River fire and got a lot of data as well, temperature of the fire and regeneration times and everything, and the benefits of different techniques that in theory they will apply in this new project.
So on the pictures we saw the professional pyromaniacs
Yes.
lighting fires.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering
Like this one better.
what material, like you said, a petroleum-based product, and how much of that product remains afterwards? I mean, I know burning fires in a way fertilizes the soil, but
Yeah.
what about the material you're using to start the fire?
That's a question for the actual fire crew. Depending on the fire, and this I do know, they may use alcohol-based or just petroleum-based igniters, basically. But it's usually done in a way that everything just consumes right there.
So it's not a residual thing?
No, it's not residual. Yes.
We do not. Okay. You got that one? Let me read a couple.
This is not about fire, but the proposed highway you talked about, would that happen to be Route 55 that they're talking about expanding?
It's not highway itself. If you've been to this area, Oswego Lake and all of these parts of the Pine, I mean, they're technically highway, right? And there's one section that's called a parkway because it's so big within the Pinelands, but these are all sand roads. And all the sand roads in the Pinelands, I mean, the main issue right now with these roads is off-road people stepping off of the main road and actually literally off-roading in the actual wetlands and areas this type of road expansion will certainly affect whatever is growing right now immediately next to the road, but it shouldn't really negatively impact wildlife that much. Some argument has been made, depending on how you do it, you may eliminate some of the nesting grounds of a couple of species like pine snakes as well. In other parts are known to like nesting next to the to roads because they like sandy areas to make their nests. But in theory, it's not going to impact that much of the wildlife or plants.
This might have been the second part of what Sam asked, but I didn't hear his question clearly. So how much prescribed burning is actually being done in New Jersey on an annual basis?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah, but the answer is easily, if you go to their website, it's there. So like forest fire, New Jersey, there's a lot of stuff. Thanks.